just accept the first challenge that I see. And wow, that was a quick start. First move already. Avenge 05 from Russia. We got ourselves a London system. My opponent is playing very quickly. But this is not considered the most accurate way of playing as white. Because queen b6, especially then queen b3, c4, queen c2, bishop f5 is considered quite comfortable for black. And here now that b3 has been forced, that is forever going to be a slight weakness in white's position. And that means that although the white clearly has no particular problems, it means that I have some prospects long term. And I gotta say, as I've said before, I feel like my opponent is playing a bit too quickly here, especially this last move, rook ac1, because there are some things to consider here, especially bishop to a3. The obvious response would then be rook c2, but that would lose to either knight takes d4 or knight b4, both moves attacking the rook and basically trapping the rook and ensuring that my rook from c8 will take the rook on c2 later on. The question is whether I can gain anything from bishop a3, rook d1, and so on. Knight takes e5, d takes e5. My knight is attacked, so I don't win a pawn. Probably I don't gain a whole lot, but I will do it anyway. Bishop a3, a rook to d1, and I will probably go queen to a5. Continuing to hunt those pawns. Rook b1 is also natural. Kind of didn't consider that. Now with queen a5, I feel like b4 could be seriously inconvenient for me. Okay, let me try and reroute the pieces instead. Bishop a3, that was a clear case of long think, wrong think, because I ended up playing a subpar move there. Now I've at least opened up the attack on the c file. So although, and this trade I'm fairly happy with, just getting his knight away from e5. And generally trades here are pretty good for me, seeing as I will be doing well in an ending because of my superior pawn structure. He does have a little trick here, which is rook to b3, or I actually have a trick because rook b3 looks strong, right? If he'd played rook b3, a b4, c b4, I cannot take on b4 with a bishop because of a3, and that bishop cannot move because of the pin on my queen. But it turns out that I can put the bishop on c1 instead. Only square that it has, but it's a good square. And later on, I can potentially trade the bishop for his knight, and I will be having a better pawn structure there. Think again, he should have gone rook b3 here, because this trade is very good for me, seeing as I have the more compact pawn structure, and his pawn on d4 is going to be weak until the day it eventually falls, and his pawn on a2 may be weak as well. Yeah, I do have the option of going knight to h5, looking for some tricks like bishop e3, rook takes e3, followed by queen takes d2, or knight b3, rook takes b3, followed by knight takes f4. But after bishop g5, I don't see it. f6 runs into queen takes g6, so I cannot really do that. So I'll do rook to c8 instead. Often the most natural move is just the best. Now rook c1 may be a bit of a threat, so I expect him to move his knight either to f3 or to b3. probably f3, and then I will almost certainly play knight e4, exploiting the fact that that square is no longer protected by one of his by his knight. I think maybe queen a6 is not stupid here. I could have gone queen a7, forced the trade. Then he goes rook takes c8, rook takes c8, knight f3, and my queen may not be doing all that much on a7. It feels like it's a bit more active on a6, and it also opens up the possibility of playing bishop to d6 later on. Once again, trading pieces should be good for me, seeing as I have the better pawn structure and therefore better prospects in the ending. Also, the one advantage of putting the queen on a6 is that I protect the c8 square, so now I can just kick his queen away. My opponent is playing well though. I think he's a little bit worse, but it's not a lot, and that's not a bad position to be in at this point. I may have a threat here, which I think he missed. Knight c3 and now knight e2 is a very strong threat. Picking up his bishop. If he moves the bishop, I will go knight to e2, and then I will play the bishop to d6 with check, and I will take on d4 with the knight, opening an attack up from the queen to a6, attacking f1, his rook there. And as far as I can see, rook c1 is maybe possible now. Sorry, rook e1. If knight e2, knight e2 he will take, and then take the bishop on a3. So that is probably the only way not to lose material immediately. I do think, however, after rook to e1, bishop to f8, I will win a pawn, because I'm threatening both knight to e2 and taking the pawn on a2. So first tangible result of the little pressure I've had here is the win of a pawn, and that is nothing to sneeze at, I believe. Yeah, we trade, and now I should eventually, probably not knight c3 because of rook c1. Now I should eventually be able to convert. Happy to play f6, taking control over both the squares his knight could possibly jump to, and yeah, later on I will probably knight d3 here, trying to reroute that knight. Bishop b4, trying to make at least pseudo active moves. At some point I have to speed up, but for the moment looks like he's doing worse on time than I am. Okay, he found a good sequence here. Rook a6. Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. Now I just have to protect and start all over again. Okay, we'll go king f7. The bishop on b4 is protected. Next I will go rook e7. If he trades rooks, I'm happy with that, since his rook was the active one. And then I'll bring my king around, and I should eventually win this game. Okay, could trade, but also just working the king up seems fine. King c4. Now I think d4 is falling, and yeah, bishop c3 seems cleanest. Take on d4 next, and 2 pawns up is at least one too much. Yeah, wherever I can flag or can win on the board, it's a nice situation to be in. Okay, good game by my opponent, and I think also a very decent game from an instructional point of view, because it showed the value of of the pawn structure, and that is eventually what decided this game.